On a crisp November evening in 1930, as the Great Depression ravaged the nation, New York City's elite converged upon the Ritz-Carlton Hotel to celebrate the 18th birthday of none other than Barbara Hutton, heiress to the monumental Woolworth store fortune. Upon arrival, the guests, hailing from the most illustrious families of the age, such as the Astors, Vanderbilts, Whitneys and Rockefellers, were greeted by Maurice Chevalier, the renowned French entertainer who was whimsically costumed as Santa Claus. The grand ballroom inside the hotel was a vision of a winter wonderland, adorned with extravagant decorations and a sea of flowers that alone bore a price tag of $50,000, equal to nearly $1 million in today's currency. The atmosphere was alive with the melodies from 4 orchestras, and the echoes of champagne cork pops filled the air as the night unfolded, with 2,000 bottles of champagne being served by a contingent of 200 waiters. But as midnight approached, the revelry did not wane. Instead, it escalated with the serving of 1,007-course suppers. And as the night stretched into the early hours, 1,000 breakfasts were laid out for those who had danced through the night. The pièce de résistance of the evening, however, was the party favours bestowed upon the guests. Each attendee received a small jewellery case filled with unmounted diamonds, emeralds, rubies and sapphires, a lavish token that left the crowd in awe of the hostess's generosity. And the celebration, which reportedly cost a staggering $60,000, equivalent to over $1 million today, was capped off by Barbara Hutton herself as the radiant centrepiece of the evening. Clad in a stunning debutante gown, she embodied the poor little rich girl, a nickname that would cling to her through varied fortunes. Thus, that night at the Ritz-Carlton was more than just a lavish party. It was the heralding of Barbara Hutton's entrance into the world of high society and the public eye. As one attendee poignantly observed, this was the moment when Bobby became Barbara Hutton, debutante, glamour queen, playgirl of the Western world. Little did they know this splendid introduction foreshadowed a tragic life of glamour, heartache, and the eternal pursuit of happiness amidst the glittering yet often unforgiving world of the rich and famous, as we describe. The tragic life of the so-called poor little rich girl, Barbara Hutton, heiress to the Woolworth fortune. Barbara Hutton, an emblem of wealth from her infancy, found herself at the centre of a vortex of fortune and scrutiny as early as 12 years old, because, with the death of her grandmother, Jenny Creighton Woolworth, in 1924, Barbara was left a staggering inheritance that rivalled the tales of fairy tale princesses. $26 million, a sum that would inflate to almost $500 million in today's currency. Even further, her mother's estate cushioned this with an additional $2.1 million in stocks. Managed by her father, Franklin Laws Hutton, this trust bloomed to a monumental $42 million by the time Barbara reached 21, crowning her one of the richest women globally during an era marked deeply by the Great Depression. You see, her father, Franklin, a titan in the financial realm and co-founder of the renowned E.F. Hutton & Co., was a master of his craft. And his financial moves, particularly his timely divestment before the 1929 market crash, significantly safeguarded and multiplied Barbara's inheritance. Yet while Franklin navigated the financial storms with acumen, his personal life brewed with scandal. The mysterious death of Barbara's mother, Edna Woolworth, in 1917, believed to be a personally induced end linked to Franklin's infidelities, left a young Barbara to stumble upon her mother's lifeless body, an image that haunted her throughout her life. And in the wake of her mother's death, Franklin's subsequent marriage to Irene Bode only deepened Barbara's emotional isolation. Regarded widely as an opportunistic stepmother, Irene's presence ensured that Barbara's upbringing was shuffled among various relatives, leaving her often in the hands of governesses rather than family. Despite these early traumas, Barbara's entry into society was nothing short of spectacular, and her aforementioned debutante ball was absolutely legendary. Now, Barbara Hutton's personal life at its peak unfolded like a carefully choreographed ballet of opulence. She owned sumptuous estates across the globe, from the Japanese-inspired Sumio in Mexico to the regal Sidi Hosni in Tangier. Each home was not merely a residence, but a testament to her wealth and her impeccable taste for the exotic and the beautiful. But her penchant for luxury was not confined to real estate. Hutton was also known for her incredible collection of jewellery, including the famed Vladimir tiara, and her wardrobe was a parade of haute couture from legends like Cristobal Balenciaga and Oleg Cassini. And it was Cassini, commissioned by Cary Grant, who attempted to navigate the tumultuous waters of their marriage through style. Socially, Barbara was a magnet for high-profile gatherings, her debutante ball in New York being particularly notable for its extravagance. Despite the allure, this display of wealth was not without its critics, especially given the harsh economic climate of the Great Depression, and her visibility and lifestyle choices made her a constant subject of media fascination and public critique. By 1934, Barbara's life had inspired both film and song, capturing the public imagination and solidifying her status as a cultural icon, albeit one often viewed through a lens of scorn and envy. This public narrative portrayed her as the poor little rich girl, a moniker that underscored the complex interplay of wealth, privilege, and personal adversity that defined her life. And yet Barbara Hutton ended her life essentially penniless, lonely, and isolated. In order to better understand how someone could go from $1 million debutante party to poverty, we must roll back the clock a bit and begin with a psychological profile rooted in her uniquely difficult youth. Born into opulence on the 14th of November 1912 in New York City, Barbara Woolworth Hutton emerged as the sole child of Edna Woolworth of the retail empire and Franklin Laws Hutton, a founder of the E.F. Hutton and Company investment firm, making her an instant heiress to one of America's grandest fortunes. Yet, the wealth that defined her birthright would also shape a life marred by emotional turmoil. You see, Barbara's upbringing was steeped in material wealth, but plagued by emotional neglect. Her father, Franklin, notorious for his infidelities, was a distant figure, while her mother, Edna, ensnared in loneliness, sought comfort in an affair with Bud Bouvier, Jacqueline Kennedy's future uncle. This chaotic household environment left Barbara profoundly isolated, craving the affection that her fractured family could not provide. And tragedy struck with brutal force at the tender age of 5 when Barbara discovered her mother lifeless, an image that would haunt her for decades. Officially, Edna's death was attributed to complications from mastoiditis, but whispers of a personally caused ending persisted, some suggesting the family might have even influenced city officials to avoid probing too deeply into the actual cause. Reeling from this loss, Barbara's subsequent childhood was a relentless shifting of guardians, as she moved from one relative's home to another. She spent significant periods at her maternal grandparents' luxurious 60-room Long Island mansion, a place where material excess was abundant, but emotional warmth was scarce. But her grandmother, Jenny Creighton Woolworth, was consumed by dementia, and her once doting grandfather, Frank Woolworth, was ailing. He affectionately called her Princess, but his failing health meant he could not provide the stable affection she so desperately needed. After her grandfather's death in 1919, Barbara's father moved her frequently, each relocation eroding her sense of stability further. Described as a wistful, imaginative, lonely child by those who knew her, Barbara harboured complex feelings for her father, intertwining threads of fear and a yearning for his approval. Throughout these formative years, Barbara's cousin Jimmy Donahue was a kindred spirit, and he too knew the cold embrace of wealth coupled with familial neglect. This bond, forged in shared experience, became a rare constant in her early life. Now Barbara's education was reflective of her status, with stints at prestigious schools like Miss Hewitt's classes and Miss Porter's School for Girls. However, the luxury of her educational background did little to heal the deep emotional wounds inflicted by her turbulent upbringing. Thus, the imprint of such a fraught childhood left an indelible mark on Barbara Hutton. As she matured, her life became a quest fraught with troubled relationships and a continuous search for the love and stability that her youth had so cruelly denied her. In the next chapter, we'll dive a bit deeper into her marriages and heartbreaks to flesh out the larger story of this tragic heiress. Barbara Hutton's quest for love was as storied as it was heartbreaking, beginning with her first marriage to Prince Alexis Mdivani in 1933. You see, Barbara first met Alexis Mdivani through a calculated encounter orchestrated by Alexis's sister, Rusadana, known as Rusi. And the Madivanis, a family of social climbers, were known for marrying into wealth, which they often flaunted in high society. Rusi thus arranged for her brother to meet Barbara under the pretense of social gatherings, exploiting Barbara's vulnerability and immense wealth. Their initial encounter then led to a scandalous affair, while Alexis was still married to his first wife, Louise Van Allen. This affair culminated in a hasty marriage to Barbara after Alexis's quick divorce from Louise, and therefore, at the young age of 20, the Woolworth heiress married the self-proclaimed Georgian prince in a grand ceremony in Paris. Dressed in a white gown with dramatic shoulders and a sweeping veil, she hoped for a fairy tale ending. Yet the reality was far from it. Madivani, infamous as one of the marrying Madivanis, quickly set about spending Hutton's vast inheritance on a luxurious home, polo ponies, lavish attire, and men's jewellery. Their marriage dissolved in March 1935, not even 2 full years after they had exchanged vows. But her divorce from Madivani did little to deter Hutton's marital pursuits. In May 1935, she entered into marriage with Count Kurt Heinrich Eberhard Erdmann, Georg von Haugwitz-Hardenberg-Reventlow. This relationship brought her only child, Lance Reventlow, into the world in 1936. However, like her first, this marriage crumbled by 1941. Barbara Hutton's third marriage, to the charismatic Hollywood icon Cary Grant, began just a year later in 1942. The couple's union was highly publicised, partly due to Hutton's immense wealth as a Woolworth heiress, and Grant's already established fame as a leading man in Hollywood. Initially, their marriage was marked by numerous social events and public appearances, reflecting their high-profile statuses. They were famously dubbed Cash and Carey, a moniker that played on Hutton's wealth and Grant's screen persona, although Grant himself was independently wealthy and did not need Hutton's financial support. However, the relationship began to deteriorate as Hutton felt overshadowed by Grant's growing film career, and despite the initial allure of their glamorous lifestyle, she later remarked that Grant was primarily interested in growing his star power, which she felt was a significant factor in their separation. The marriage was ultimately unable to withstand these internal and external pressures, leading them to divorce amicably without seeking monetary compensation from one another. Continuing her search for marital happiness, Hutton married Prince Igor Trubetskoy in 1947, though this union also ended in divorce by 1951. Her fifth marriage in 1953 to Dominican diplomat Porfirio Rubirosa was notably brief, dissolving after only 53 days. Then, in 1955, Hutton's marriage to German tennis star Baron Gottfried von Cramm also raised societal eyebrows, given von Cramm's known sexual orientation and past imprisonment for, at the time, illegal homosexual activities. Therefore, this union too ended in 1959, further complicating her tumultuous love life. Her final marital attempt was with Prince Pierre Raymond Doan Vin Champasak, an adopted member of the former royal family of Laos, in 1964. This last venture into matrimony concluded in 1966, closing the chapter on Hutton's marriages. Thus, Hutton's numerous marriages, each ending in disappointment, painted a portrait of a woman endlessly searching for stability and happiness that eluded her. Her romantic endeavours, coupled with her immense wealth, made her a perennial subject of media intrigue and public sympathy. And despite her efforts, lasting love remained just out of reach, and her later years were marked by loneliness and financial difficulties, as we'll see in the next chapter. Barbara Hutton, once one of the wealthiest women globally, witnessed her fortune dissolve under the weight of extravagant spending and financial mismanagement, particularly during the 1940s to the 1960s. By then, her collection of properties worldwide and her incessant travels to exotic locales had marked a lifestyle that contributed significantly to her financial downfall. And her aforementioned tumultuous personal life, marked by 7 marriages, heavily influenced her financial choices. Several of her spouses were accused of siphoning her wealth, with hefty divorce settlements further depleting her fortune. For example, her first husband, Prince Alexis Madivani, secured a $2 million settlement during their marriage. and another costly union with Count Kurt Haugwitz-Reventlow allegedly cost her an additional $1.5 million. These financial drains, coupled with her lavish gifts to her husbands, steadily eroded her vast resources. But Hutton's spending was not limited to her marital affairs. She frequently made impulsive purchases, including costly jewellery and artworks, which continued to strain her finances. Her lack of financial acumen and dependence on others for estate management left her vulnerable to exploitation. Furthermore, entering the 1960s and 1970s, Hutton's life shadowed darker themes, as she faced severe health issues and addiction battles, a struggle that began around her son Lance's birth in her 20s, but worsened with age. You see, Hutton's health woes were compounded by her addiction to barbiturates, particularly Seconal, which she used to manage her anxiety and stress. Her substance use, often mixed dangerously with alcohol, led to several near-fatal overdoses and even a coma. In her later years, Hutton's physical health deteriorated significantly. She became nearly blind and suffered from a hip injury causing chronic pain, and her mental health also declined, marked by erratic behaviour, mood swings and paranoia. Increasingly reclusive, Hutton spent most of her days bedridden, dependent on her staff for care. The tragic death of her only son, Lance Reventlow, in a 1972 plane crash, plunged her into profound despair, exacerbating her isolation and depression. She retreated further from the social world that once defined her, moving into an upscale hotel in Beverly Hills to live out her remaining years in seclusion. Her health, both physical and mental, declined sharply during this period, and she grappled with severe anorexia and a debilitating hip injury that rendered her bedridden, while her failing eyesight further disconnected her from the world around her. Furthermore, financial ruin paralleled her physical deterioration, and despite her precarious financial situation, she continued her pattern of giving, often to strangers who paid her any mind, further straining her resources. By the time of her death, it was reported that she had a mere $3,500 to her name, equal to around $15,000 today. But to be fair, this is a figure hotly contested by those close to her, yet symbolic of her dramatic fall from financial grace. Hutton's life came to a quiet close on the 11th of May 1979 due to a heart attack in her hotel suite at the age of 66. Her passing was a poignant bookend to a life characterised by both dazzling wealth and deep personal tragedy. The public, who had watched her rise and fall with keen interest over the decades, reacted to her death with a mix of shock and sympathy. The funeral of Barbara Hutton was therefore as subdued as her final years were lonely, and it took place in the Woolworth family mausoleum at Woodlawn Cemetery in the Bronx, New York, where she was laid to rest among her relatives. The service was attended by only a close circle of family and friends, a muted affair far removed from the lavish social gatherings she once hosted. This solemn gathering served as a reflective homage to a woman whose life had been a complex interplay of immense isolation and public fascination. And now we'd love to see you in the comments. Were you familiar with the story of Barbara Hutton? And what is your opinion of the epic rise and tragic fall of the story of this old money heiress? Our community thrives off of your thoughts, so please don't be shy and leave a word or two below. Thanks again for joining us, and we can't wait to see you on the next episode.